All right, then I will turn it over to Josh to introduce today's program.
So today we have Ashley Mumm from the Oregon Food Bank. She's an Oregon native. She currently lives in Portland with her partner, their opinionated 2-year-old, 2 dogs, and 5 chickens. She grew up around Washington County and fondly recalls volunteering with her mom in various food assistance sites as a child. Having experienced food insecurity herself, she is drawn to OFB because of the great work they do in the community and have been on the marketing team since 2019. She's here to share a bit about what they do and how we can support them in their efforts to end hunger for good. If you can please join me in welcoming Ashley Mumm.
Hey everyone, thank you for having me. I'm going to share my screen, yeah? Make sure I pick the right desktop. Okay. No, I can't see. Okay, are you all seeing the presentation still?
Looks great.
Okay, can you see all my notes too or no?
No notes.
Okay, not that I don't want you to see them, but that's boring. Okay, so yes, thank you. I have been at different Rotary events in the past, and this is definitely my first Zoom Rotary, so thank you for having me. I was a friend of Rotary in Newburgh when I lived down in McMinnville, so I'm well-versed in the role that you all have in your community, so thank you for all that you do and for being here today. So, you heard a little bit about me. I went to Hillsborough High School, fondly remember the outdoor campus and the cow farm that was very close by, but I do have a very fond affinity for Hillsborough and Forest Grove, so I'm very happy to join you all. Today, I'm going to talk a little bit about just hunger today to kind of set the stage for what we're seeing at Oregon Food Bank. I'm going to talk a little bit about our role in anti-hunger work and a few ways for you all to get involved. So our mission, if y'all are not familiar, is to eliminate hunger and its root causes because we believe no one should be hungry. And I am, like Josh mentioned, am fond about this mission because I experienced food insecurity myself. So I feel that this is a noble cause, and I appreciate you all having us here to share a little bit more about it. Pre-pandemic, there was about 1 in 11 Oregonians experiencing food insecurity. This culminated in about 865,000 people coming to the Oregon Food Bank Network each year. We serve Oregon and Southwest Washington, so Clark County, and nearly half of school-age children in Oregon qualified for free or reduced cost lunch in 2018 and 2019. So this is kind of a stark picture. Hunger was bad before the pandemic. After the pandemic or during the pandemic today, hunger has pretty much doubled. This is according to the OSU policy and legislative report that they put out in 2020. So about 1 in 5 in our communities are facing hunger today, which is far, far too many. We know that there are many causes to hunger, and unfortunately, there are some that are facing unequal, disproportionate effects of hunger. So those are people of color, immigrants and refugees, single parents and caregivers, and trans and gender nonconforming neighbors. So those are our key constituencies, given that they experience hunger in much larger numbers, but that's not to say that we don't also want to feed those that don't fit into those categories as well. We just know that you have to put out the first fire, the worst fire first, right? And then you can move on to the other smaller subsequent fires that are also burning at the same time. And like I mentioned, 2 of the root causes of hunger are stemmed in poverty and inequity, which are also driven by things like systemic racism. Unfortunately, it's kind of rooted in a lot of things. So we know that hunger is an income issue. 68% of people accessing food assistance have incomes below the federal poverty level, which is $25,000 for a family of 4. I cannot imagine making that work with my family of 3. Income volatility leads to food insecurity, and lack of savings and assets also leads to food insecurity, which just makes it really hard to catch up and be able to afford food. Inequity is really any group that has experienced oppression, so racism, sexism, ableism, all of those things make it more probable that a person will experience poverty and hunger. And of course, there are others that cause hunger as well, like food ingenuity, social networks, housing, health. And again, a lot of those are rooted in inequities and systemic racism that benefit some over others. Some of the ramifications of hunger that we see, especially in children, is a very physical effect, but there's also a lot of mental effects as well. So depression, there's this feeling of isolation. Hunger has just so many implications on a person's well-being, and it really starves the human spirit, which was a tagline of ours, is that we want to feed the human spirit. So not only feed their bellies and make sure that they're not suffering from hunger, but that they also feel like they are being somewhat fulfilled, which is hard when you don't have food and you don't know where your next meal is coming from. What's even more stark is that this can be passed down through generational trauma. So even if you are now food secure, if your family was food insecure, that can actually affect your genetics, which is very fascinating and very sad. So the drive and the desire to solve hunger is even greater when we think about the long-term effects. So Oregon Food Bank, in order to fulfill our mission to end hunger for good, we are working on the systemic issues that really are at the root of hunger, that build hunger, that build on each other to perpetuate hunger. So we want to build community connections to help people access nutritious, affordable food today. And then we also want to build the community power to be able to eliminate the root causes of hunger for good. And so those are big dreams. We hope to put ourselves out of business as our goal. It would be great if we didn't exist and didn't have to feed folks, but for now we are here. And we do that through the Oregon Food Bank Network. We're kind of at the base of this tree, as we like to use an analogy. There's Oregon Food Bank, which we are part of the Feeding America Network, which you may have heard of. They are in all 50 countries. We are the one food bank for Oregon, and we are one of 20 other regional food banks. And we, as you can see on the map, are all over the state. There's also Clark County in there above Portland, where all of the orange dots are in the metro area. And you all have, I want to say, about 15 or so in the Hillsborough, Forest Grove area. There's even one in Banks, which was impressive. There's one in Gaston, too, I believe. So there's little pockets everywhere. And those little food assistance sites, those food assistance sites are one of roughly 1,400 that are in the network that get food from the 21 regional food banks. So it's this tree of incoming food, Oregon Food Bank distributing that food through the network, and then those 1,400 partner associations are distributing the food to the public. So there's lots of them in schools, churches, community centers. There's mobile ones today. There's a lot of an ingenuity that's been happening in the last couple of months as we deal with the pandemic to get food out safely to people. We were founded in 1975 as the Interagency Food Bank. We then merged with Oregon Food Share in 1988, and since then we've been Oregon Food Bank. We are, again, the only Feeding America Network member here in Oregon. We've been able to stand the test of time for 3 decades, and I think a lot of that can be attributed to our shared power. We're not holding all the power. We are not the leaders of the Oregon Food Bank Network. We are just one member, and we work with the community, all of these other independent entities, to make sure that we can meet the needs of the community as they see fit, as they tell us they need it, right? That's part of the community power, is we don't feel it's in our responsibility, not so much responsibility, but it's not our place to dictate how we should solve hunger. So we're asking people experiencing hunger, hiring people like me who have experience with lived food insecurity, and really coming up with solutions that fix the issue, the root of the issue, rather than just kind of putting a Band-Aid on things. So our role is somewhat high level. We do that, we're trying to create a community that is resilient by these 4 routes. So we work with community food systems, working with communities to try to solve their own problems. That sounds a little put offish. What we're trying to do is empower them to be able to solve their food system problems. So if there's a scarcity of food, then we can fix that. There often isn't really a scarcity of food. It's more just a lack of access to resources. So we can help with food system assessments. We can analyze where there may be gaps. We can potentially intervene in the meantime. And we can really empower them to take this on as their own project and make successful long-term. We also do that through healthcare partnerships. So there's this program called Screen and Intervene. If you've been at the doctor within the past couple of years, you may have noticed that they've asked you if you've experienced food insecurity. That's part of this. The Screen and Intervene program uses 2 validated questions to screen children and families for food insecurity at well-child appointments. So perhaps some of your grandchildren have seen this question come up. The program has been implemented at 2 Providence medical clinics, and we hope to expand that to more. I think there's about 400 plus that have that now, and we've screened over 1.5 million people. And this has helped us identify some of the food insecurity in our communities. We also do this through organizing and policy advocacy. Again, there's over 865,000 people that access the food bank in a non-pandemic year. We think that that number is going to be well over 1 million, given we've seen hunger roughly double in the last 12 months. So this organizing and advocating for policy that will make hunger less of an issue is what is going to solve the problem. So we want to get our 40,000 volunteers engaged. We want to work with our 150,000 donors and volunteers and really empower them to take this to the legislative level. And we also do this through education programs. So we have a program called Cooking Matters. We also did a Learning Gardens program to kind of help lift up farmers to go on their own and break into the farming industry. And then we also did a program of Seed to Supper, so teaching people how to grow food and then cook nutritious food and make that food nourish their bodies. I went backwards, I think. My apologies. Here we go. Okay, I hope this isn't too blurry. This is from our 2020 impact report. So even in the midst of the pandemic, our community has really come together and stepped up and ensured that Oregon Food Bank and the Oregon Food Bank Network has been able to continue to meet need for the 1 million plus people that have had to come to Oregon Food Bank, especially with wildfires, and the smoke was really intrusive, and then power outages now. So there's just been a lot that's been going on in the last 12 months. And luckily we've had, almost 7,500 people take action on the legislative level to 48,000 supporters. Did you have a question?
To look, but I don't think so. I mean,
Okay.
maybe we're like action coming out
Yeah,
or
that's what
something.
I heard.
Got him.
Yeah. So we have done a lot. We've distributed enough food for almost 58 million meals, and we've been able to divert a lot of food waste in the industry. And by doing that, we've been able to provide a lot more fresh and frozen produce. So we're trying to get out of the model of, I think somebody earlier said, think outside the box. We're trying to think outside the food box model, which is not always the most dignified. So we have this full report on our website. If you'd like to see it, I can share that out later if you want to see more of what we've been up to in the last year. Our legislative goals, since we're in a legislative session right now, is these 3 areas, and we hope that this will help address some of the root causes of hunger. That's food insecurity and economic justice. We want to reduce hunger on college campuses. So there's a bill right now about navigators in colleges to help college students access the resources that they need for food. Unfortunately, I think there was a survey that came out that said about 70% of students were experiencing food insecurity. That's a lot of people. We want to leave no workers behind, so we want to advocate for the Oregon's Earned Income Tax Credit. There's about 5 or 6 ballot initiatives in there right now. We want to work toward racial justice and immigrant rights. So we want to protect the rights of every Oregonian and support policies that ensure education and healthcare are available for all Oregonians. And then lastly, we want to really ensure that there's COVID relief for everyone. So we want to promote economic recovery and prosperity for our essential workers. And this is through the Oregon Worker Relief Fund, which you may have heard about. And we want to be responsive to future rounds of federal stimulus to ensure that people aren't left behind, which is what the Oregon Worker Relief Fund was created for. There was many people left out of the stimulus. So the time is now. We have the opportunity. The pandemic, unfortunately, really opened, I think, many eyes to the struggles and challenges that were present in our communities before. The pandemic has really just exacerbated a lot of that. We can see that in the people who are actually contracting COVID-19 and who are dying from the disease, or the virus rather. It's still disproportionate in our state. We as humans have a basic set of needs, food being one of them. And we know that there is enough food. We just need to create the systems to make sure people have access to it. So I'm hoping that we can all ground together on our shared values of leaving no one behind and making sure that all Oregonians have the support they need and the basic needs met, like food and housing and hopefully healthcare as well, to make sure that we live long, healthy lives. So I hope that we can come together and rebuild our systems and create policies that work for everyone. So a few ways to get involved is to volunteer. A lot of our partners in the Portland metro area are still looking for volunteers as well. We've had to, of course, downsize our shifts. We had shifts of 100 people before the pandemic. Now we're doing about 10. So it's a much slower process. So volunteers are always welcomed as long as you're healthy, you feel safe enough, especially with the vaccines being implemented. We hope that we can get some volunteers back into the community. You can also advocate for and support legislation that will help end hunger. And then obviously donate. For every $1 that Oregon Food Bank is donated, we can purchase and move enough food for 3 meals. So that is much more impactful than, say, if I were to go to a store and buy a can of vegetables, for example. My dollar is not going to go as far without the power of the Oregon Food Bank network. And again, this is kind of our mission. We envision resilient communities throughout Oregon and Southwest Washington that never go hungry, because everyone deserves to eat. And I think I left enough time for questions. I know this was a lot of information, and I know we're all multitasking as well. So if you have any questions, please feel free to ask.
I put some in the chat box, Ashley. The first one was, what connectivity, I have 2 questions. What connectivity does Oregon Food Bank have with our project at the high school food pantry? And there's a lady in town whose first name is Robin, and Butch will know her last name, but she's like in charge of a bunch of gleaners. So how are you working with the gleaners who are getting the food off of the farms?
You mean Robin Lindsley?
Raising a hand. I'm not familiar with Robin personally. The Forest Grove High School may be affiliated with the Oregon Food Bank. It may also just be funded or a partnership through Washington County as well. I know here in Multnomah County, we work with the Portland Public Schools, and we've set up a number of pantries. I apologize, I didn't do enough research about Forest Grove to know specifically about that pantry. But a lot of the gleaners are, it's kind of a mixed bag. So some are in the network, the Oregon Food Bank network, and do get food through us, through the Oregon Food Bank warehouses. There's one off Cornell and then one in Northeast Portland as well. The gleaners, it's kind of up to them if they want to be part of the network. No one is forced. And it is a symbiotic relationship. So we can provide resources, provide access to food that they may not have been able to purchase or procure otherwise. And we also do things like lobbying, right? So we can offer some things that they may not have access to otherwise, but they are still independent. So I don't know if that answers your question. Some of the gleaners choose not to be part of the network, which is totally fine.
I have a question. You mentioned around changing distribution away from the food box model. So I just kind of wanted to hear more what that looks like.
Yeah. So The reason we do this, and I know you didn't ask about reason, but I want to touch on it.
I think that's important. Thank you for touching on that.
Okay. Yeah. It's, and myself just having access to a food bank before coming to work at Oregon Food Bank, it was very degrading to be given a box that I would not pick out myself or could not eat, for example. So say I had diabetes and I'm given a box of food that I cannot eat. That's not the experience we want folks to have. So being hungry, being unable to purchase food doesn't remove the worthiness of respect. So we're trying to move away from a food box. We're trying to move away from this prescribed set of food that may or may not meet your dietary or cultural needs, right? There's a lot of folks in our community that do not eat the same things that perhaps a dominant culture would eat. So we try to, one, give them choice. So a lot of our pantries moved to a shopping sort of style where you could go through the store and get things that you would eat. There's less waste that way. There's more dignified experiences, and you get to choose the food that is more meaningful and more fulfilling for you, right, as a person. Unfortunately, the pandemic has made that a lot more difficult. So we are using boxes, but now there's less of a shopping style. People are filling out orders. There's one pantry in North Portland that just rolled out an online app to order your food. So there's ingenuity happening, which is really cool. And there's a lot of drive-throughs going on. So it's a different feel, but I'm hoping that despite the challenges of the pandemic, we can still give people choice and respect in their search for food. Yeah.
Ashley, I have a question. This is Amy, no camera, Tracewell.
Okay.
I work at Pacific, and at one point there was a distribution at Pacific, and I think it was associated with a chain from the senior center.
Okay.
Did you touch on that and I missed it? Or if not, do you know if that might resume at some point? It was like a free distribution table of food, and it came from a discontinuation from the senior center. Do you know anything about that?
I don't personally know. I'm looking now. I don't see Pacific on our list of pantries in the area. But if the pantry is only open to students, it may also not be on our application.
It was open to the community. It was like a community. It was a free distribution.
Okay.
Yeah.
Not just for students.
No, it was open to the community.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that one, but I do have teammates that work on our relationship building that way. So I'm happy to connect them. If you have a contact or if you'd like to reach out, I can connect you with someone that deals with our pantry relationships.
I'm just curious. I can connect here internally at Pacific. I just wondered if you had a sense of that. So thank you.
Yeah, I don't know if it shut down because of COVID. I know a lot of schools were unable to operate during the winter storm that we just had. So I don't know if it's temporary or if it was just a long-term decision to close. There are others, like I see one over on 19th over at Foursquare. There's one at St. Anthony. So it may just be that the staffing was also an issue. So unable to get volunteers to staff the pantry. So I'm not sure exactly what happened there.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, sorry, that didn't help.
Ashley, I have a question here. This is Josh.
Yeah.
How is the Oregon Food Bank meeting the demand with kind of like there are fewer volunteers, I imagine, with the pandemic, and you said the demand is doubled during that time. So how are you kind of meeting that demand, like the manpower demand, like the work that needs?
Yeah. Early on in the pandemic, we did purchase services or pay for services, so there was a lot less ability for us to sort through large bulk orders. So we started purchasing food that was already portioned out, that the manufacturers could do for us on their end before it got sent to us. You know, we would get enormous crates of potatoes, for example, and we no longer had the staffing volunteer power to sort through all of those and divide them into 5-pound bags. So there was a lot of changes. We did a lot more purchasing of those services early on. I think we probably continue that to this day. And then also with our donors, we're asking them to assist in making that food more readily available to hand out as well. So we do still have volunteer shifts 7 days a week. The winter storms threw a wrench into all of that, of course, but we are maintaining. And I see volunteers in our volunteer repack area every time I go into the office, which is rare, but it's still chugging along.
Well, thank you so much, Ashley, for bringing this program to us today. The food insecurity is real. It's in all of our communities, especially this past year. And we appreciate so much what you do. It's definitely been a growing program in Forest Grove, too. I think our food pantry at the high school's less than 2 years old. And it's been very active. So again, thank you so much.